And this is where I think we need to also emphasize the fact that much of the motivation of the good that has happened in colonies was all because of the influence of the missionaries. Even the East India Company hated the missionaries for the reforms that they were bringing in terms of education, in terms of changing the local cultures. So I think missionaries are the ones, the rightful ones, who deserve the credit for bringing about the right and true. Yeah. And I think uh, that's exactly, and I think, Logan, you are emphasizing on the fact that that's our role today, that we continue to actually promote that which is good and what is possibly good through the means of Christian belief
Yeah,
and
and one way to
practices.
do that is to continue to emphasize through the celebration of a holiday the incarnation of God, right? So, I mean, the holiday and the celebration of it. And we did our Christmas caroling last night at church, and I mean the old hymns. There's a reason why they're still so popular, even amongst secular people, because
Even Richard Dawkins is missing that.
when you sing "Oh Holy Night," right? When you sing that song, or "What Child Is This?" I mean, it. Look at that. This is still. These are still some of the primary tools of evangelism for the church, and we wouldn't want to abandon. I mean, I think we've dispelled this idea that Christmas is in any way a pagan thing that we need to weed out of our Christian culture or the church. But still, Christmas is and the trappings of Christmas, the good ones, are means of evangelism.
And we need to also see that, to add to Logan's case, just while people are going against Christmas and celebration of Christmas, they're not objecting to the celebration of Eid. They're not celebrating, they're not objecting to the celebration of the
Right.
festival of lights, as they call it, Diwali or Holi, and all those celebrations that are coming in and promoting their ideas and ideologies. So we
Yeah.
should be asking that too.
So here's a great example. A couple of years ago, the American Atheists ran a series of billboards across the country, and it had a picture of Santa. Said, "Go ahead and skip church. Just be good for goodness' sake. Happy holidays." That was the American Atheists, and their spokesman Randy Gotovich said, "Quote: We're just trying to be inclusive of everyone in Christmas and saying that anyone can celebrate it. It shouldn't be viewed strictly as a Christian holiday." End quote. And I'm like, what are you talking about? First of all, what do you mean be good for goodness sake? Where does that come from? Why didn't Godovich say something like, we don't need this holiday at all? We don't need something infused with religion. We have Darwin Day. Go ahead. We'll just celebrate Darwin Day and you have Christmas. For some reason, he doesn't want to do that. It's like, what are they talking about here? I don't know if I've often wondered if Godovich is a deontologist, because if you want to be good for goodness' sake, that sounds
right. That sounds very Kantian. Yeah, okay.
But this is the
Go ahead,
important part,
Logan.
right? Like the idea of being able to just rebaptize or just baptize a holiday, I think is important. I think Christians can do that. But then that's the next step, is this sort of then holding the holiday, so to speak, as a Christian holiday. And the fight will always be over the material aspects of the holiday. A Christmas that has Christ like in the heavens is acceptable. He can stay up there. He can do his own thing. You can do it in the privacy of your own homes. But the moment you start like introducing like humanness to the Christian holiday, even the things that seem irrelevant, like people attack Santa, they'll attack the reindeer and the Christmas tree and the candy canes and the stockings and the mice and all these sorts of things. But the reason why they become controversial is because when Christianity adopts a very humanness aspect to the holiday, and not just this sort of like spiritualized holiday, you're going to take in things that humans come into contact with all the time, and then you mythologize them a little bit and make them very nice, and because that's what people remember. Those are the tools that people take and they take with them, and they realize, and like I was in Japan, like the idea of like going to Easter with the fertility question, like anyone who's dealt with rabbits knows why that rabbits often are associated with fertility. Okay. If you're going to raise them, if you're going to be around them as pests or as pets. And so it's like, there is this thing that needs to be sort of like wrestled with within the Christian church, that like everything spiritual, especially in Christianity, is not just the spirit. Like there are very spiritual things that are embodied, which is the like kind of the message of Christmas, is the idea of a spirit coming, so to speak, and being manifested in those sorts of things. So it's like we do need to realize like that's where the fight will be. And when Christians let all that go, they're like losing the battle, so to speak, of a human form of Christianity that is for like humans.
Yeah, Logan and I saw. Did you see that today? There was the first time that a nativity scene was displayed on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. It was a marked. Yeah, it was a marked because of the ruling of a federal court judge that says that the steps of the U.S. Capitol are considered a public area. It's the people's house, therefore the house of the people. Therefore, as a public area, it is open to free speech, and so. A church group brought a nativity and put it on the steps of the U.S. Capitol as their free speech, and they had to fight for that. They had to fight, and it's never been done before, which actually struck me as odd. I know that there's a lot of nativity scene fights that happen when you're talking about city property and this and that, and that is a whole different issue.
The nativity, what's important about it is like not like, I mean, it's important for the like conceptual understanding, but the idea of like a mother and a father and a child being surrounded by some animals, like the animals were like, for most cases, food or like product, but like that's important, and the argument, oh, that's commercializing or something, like, okay, but it needs to be there. Like a nativity with just Jesus by himself is like not a nativity, and just Mary's not a nativity, and just Joseph is not a nativity. Yeah. Like the humanness of it has to be there. Like that's part of it.
It speaks into the challenges of our culture today.
And just on a side note here, as we draw things to a close, on the issue of whether or not Jesus was born in a cave or a stable, I think the best reading of Luke's gospel is that he was born in the guest room of a typical Palestinian or home at the time, and I've seen houses like this in. It became very real to me what kind of house this would have been when I was in Afghanistan, because when we were going through the villages, we saw houses where the animals are right there in the house.
That's right.
Right. In just a separate, it's not even a separate room, and they're a little lower than the main floor, and the trough is in the floor, kind of.
Right. The first century Bethlehem house is in Bethlehem that you can go and tour today.
They probably were surrounded by family members.
And we need to understand this changes everything, right? This changes the way you look at the baby Christ. When the hymn writers write, they're right in saying that there's a king in the manger, as they would put it. It's a king who is born, who receives the tribute of a king.
Yeah,
and ushers in his kingdom. And that changes the whole perspective of what celebration means for us today.
Well, and I wonder if our celebrations, there are things that I even remember growing up which would have been the 80s, mainly in the 80s and early 90s. And I haven't seen these in a while. Now, that was growing up as a Catholic, but certainly this could be done, whether one is Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodox, but more public. You think like, oh, well, we have plenty of public expressions of Christmas. Well, we have Christmas lights, and obviously people can put blow-ups. The blow-ups are getting crazy these days. They're like 20 feet tall, and people like doing the lights, and certainly the Christian families will put displays on their lawns of the nativity and so on and so forth. But, I haven't seen people go house to house Christmas caroling in a long time. I don't know. Maybe it's still, we're living in LA County, Orange County, but maybe it's still done in smaller towns across America. I don't know. It seems to me like most Christmas caroling has become a private or a privatized kind of thing. You do it at your church group, you do it at home, you do it at your private Christmas party, you do it in church. But the idea of people going door to door and caroling, I haven't seen that in a long time. And I wonder if it might take a little bit of courage to do so. I'm sure there are churches that are doing it.
There are.
And but things like that too. You know, and I'm talking about not singing Bing Crosby songs, although Bing Crosby was great. Don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about singing from the hymnal, right?
Yeah.
In public. So, anyways, okay. Well, I hope we've dispelled some myths about Christmas and maybe established a little bit of a theology of Christmas as a means to evangelism. Bringing people back to the light that is Christ, who came into the world.
Fight, feast, and keep the
Defeat
faith.
darkness. Absolutely.